Some of the U.S. states are pretty aggressive in trying to recruit and lure companies even to relocate from Ontario and offer them all kinds of stuff. My sense of it is that the reason that we're in that running and that Google, for example, does Sidewalk Labs here in Toronto, the province has for a long time now, over 10 years, made these pretty significant investments and has been talking about producing a highly trained, highly skilled workforce. You talked about STEM, right? Yeah. Science, technology, engineering
and mathematics. Yeah.
So is this kind of our new place in the global economy? Are we building an economy that's based on really smart people graduating from our system and hopefully staying here and not leaving for Silicon Valley or wherever else the pastures may be greener?
I mean, that is a huge component of our I'll call it skills training agenda, but it's also a huge part of our economic agenda for the next number of years. We know that for a province like ours, with the quality of life that we have, we know that if we want to continue to create and then lure the kind of investment that will support jobs that pay well, that compensate our workers well, that we need to focus on the 6 or 7 inches between our population's ears, our brains. We need to make sure that we're using our investments to support that kind of outcome, and that's really why, as I mentioned, as you've mentioned, the STEM increase in terms of the graduates. Think about that for a quick second. When we've completed that over the next few years, Ontario will be the #1 STEM graduating, producing, if that's the right phrase, a place in North America, yielding in North America on a per capita basis. When you think about artificial intelligence, when you think about automated and connected technology, nanotechnology, 5G, all of this stuff it's a fundamental part of the economy that sits right in front of us today, but certainly the economy that we're going to see over the next number of years. I would also say, while it's really important for us to be in that space, my ministry, working closely with the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development, also wants to make sure that in our manufacturing sector, in our construction sector, that we continue to have skilled tradespeople that are proud to pursue careers in that realm, in those sectors. And I know that we have a bit of a challenge. I've heard that. I was in Windsor yesterday and spoke to some folks in the mold making industry, for example. They talked about the demographic shifts that they're seeing within the industrial base, within their manufacturing sector, and the need for new talent, and the need to actually encourage more women to consider careers in the trades. It's actually a pretty fascinating process that they're going through in places like Windsor. I was in Aurelia just the day before yesterday and heard the same concern being expressed there. So we need to make sure we're constantly investing in innovation, but we also have to make sure that we have the workforce that can fill all of the gaps that we're going to have.
So last question I want to ask you. So it's great we're producing highly trained, highly skilled, super smart people. We have some that work here, are really smart people. Our entire crew that produces this show is basically one guy with a bit of help, so he's a pretty smart guy.
Absolutely.
Your ministry does have some industrial subsidy programs. It has had, and it predates you, a Jobs and Prosperity Fund, and then there was the Strategic Jobs and Investment Fund. So there have been programs and tools that the Ontario government has to recruit or retain businesses that are good employers here in the province. Your principal opponent, Mr. Ford, has said that he absolutely opposes what he calls corporate welfare, and that if and when the time comes where he wants to either recruit or retain a company in Ontario, that he'll do so through tax incentives. So a couple of questions. One is, I think I've been around this stuff long enough to know that if the province spends $1 or gives someone a tax credit for $1, the impact on Treasury is the same. Yeah. And secondly, how can you, being in the minister's chair right now, is it feasible to kind of go at these companies kind of one at a time and say, I'll do this tax incentive for you, but I'll do this tax incentive for you? How would you administer such a program?
Yeah, I mean, this strikes me as yet another kind of bizarre approach that Doug Ford's suggesting he would take if he were ever to become Premier of the province. In a way, I'm not surprised to hear a Conservative leader talk about the need to not support strategic investments in companies in our economy. Many people watching will remember, again, 9, 10 years ago when our government, working with the then federal government, decided that it was critically important to step in.
Right?
But it was critically important for our Liberal government, working with the feds, to step in and help support Ontario's auto sector, for example, which was facing some real tough times back in 08, 09. Conservatives in that moment here provincially said we shouldn't be doing that. They have consistently criticized us for making the decision to support some really, really important employment-producing sectors. I can tell you, there are more than 800,000 people who work directly and indirectly in our auto sector here in this province. That's 800,000 families that frankly still are employed today, are supported today, have a good quality of life because government stepped in and supported them with strategic investments a decade ago. And I think it's actually really sad that Mr. Ford would suggest that that's not the kind of move that we should be looking at, that we should be developing policy kind of on a whim, on the back of a napkin. That's not an industrial strategy, that's not an economic blueprint, that's a recipe for disaster. We're not going to go down that path. We've had success with the strategic investments that we've been making all across this province, creating jobs, supporting families, and building a really, really flourishing and sustainable economy. And that's what we're going to continue to focus on.